Hello everybody and welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be sharing with you a large unhaul. I haven't done an unhaul in I think like 2 years now, which is kind of crazy, but I'm gonna try and kind of revitalize an old series that I did on my channel back in 2019, I want to say 2018 or 2019, where I did a whole spring cleaning mini series. So I started off by going through my books and picking out some books that I need to part ways with, which is going to be featured in this video, my unhaul. Then the next video to come around is going to be a bookshelf reorganization video, and finally I'm going to end off with an updated bookshelf tour, which I haven't done since 2019 or 2020. So some of these books I'm going to be donating, and some of these books I'm going to be selling on like Facebook Marketplace just to kind of make some extra pocket money, because quite a few of them are still in really good condition, but they're just not needing to be on my shelf anymore. Some of these I've had on my TBR shelf since like 2018, even longer for a few of them. Some of which I've purchased semi-recently within the last year, but I know I'm not going to get to them. And some that I have read and really didn't enjoy enough to want to keep. So it's going to be an interesting ride. I'm only going to show you guys the kind of modern reads. I'm getting rid of quite a few classics that I got at used book sales that I don't need to have on my shelf anymore, and some books from school. But those are kind of boring, so I'm just going to leave those off. But these are going to be all of the pretty much modern books that I am going to be parting ways with. So let's just get started. The first selection of books, I guess you could say, are kind of historical fiction in genre. The first of which I am going to be getting rid of is All the Light We Cannot See by Anti-tbr. So this I've had on my shelf since probably 2015. It's been 7 years. I still haven't read it. This is a World War II historical fiction novel following our main character who is blind. And she lives in Paris, in Nazi-occupied Paris. And it follows another main character as well. I'm not positive on the plot. I know it's getting made into a movie with, I want to say Dakota and Elle Fanning. I'm not quite sure. But I think I've decided that I'm not going to get to any more World War II historical fiction. It's just not something I'm interested in and haven't been for the last 5 years or so. So it's time to let it go. Along that same realm, I'm going to be getting rid of Lovely War by Julie Berry. This is another World War II historical fiction novel. It's told in an interesting format in that it's told from the point of view of Aphrodite, as she's explaining to the Greek gods and the Greek pantheon why she allowed two star-crossed lovers to fall in love, basically. Actually follows World War I storyline and a World War II storyline, but I've heard great things. I'm sure it's for some people, but I don't think I'm going to get to it anytime soon. So it needs to go to somebody else who's going to enjoy it more. Next up is a stack of one author who I've read a couple books by, but I have a ton more and I'm not going to get to them. And that is Philippa Gregory. So I have The Red Queen and The White Queen. I've read both of those, and then unread I have The Favored Child, Taming of the Queen, Virgin's Lover, and The Other Berlin Girl. So Philippa Gregory I believe she is a historian herself, but she writes historical fiction mainly focused on the English monarchy, especially back during the 1600s. And it always follows a female member of the monarchy and the royal family. I know that Red Queen followed Margaret Beaufort, who was the mother of Henry VII, and then The White Queen is next up Elizabeth Woodville, who marries Henry VII. So it was mostly followed on like Tudor era England, and I enjoyed the first two books. I read them while I was at my cottage in different years, and they were great summer reads. But I've had the rest of these on my shelf for quite a long time, and I've just never felt the urge to pick one up. So I think it's time to part ways. I am very fascinated with the like Tudor era of the English monarchy, but I don't think it's something that I'm going to be picking up in anytime soon for any of these. So it's time to part ways. I know that Philippa Gregory is quite a popular author, so hopefully somebody else can enjoy these more than I will. Along a similar note, I have 4 books here that kind of don't fit into other categories that I've made, and one of them is a nonfiction. It is Anne Boleyn, 500 Years of Lives by Haley Nolan. This is a historical nonfiction novel telling the story of Anne Boleyn, but in a more truthful light, assumedly. Somebody on TikTok I saw recommended this, and I thought it would be interesting, but the more that I started reading it, because I tried reading this about 6 months ago, the more I started reading it, the more I realized that the author really dramatized quite a bit and is writing it as kind of like a, almost like an expose. Like the first chapter, or the introduction, is titled, "Can You Handle the Truth?" And there's like hashtag the truth will out on the back that I missed, and it's just, it's not my style of nonfiction, let's just say that, so I'm going to pass this along. Similarly, I love Neil Gaiman, but I'm getting rid of this copy of American Gods just because it's mass market paperback. I picked it up in a book fair just because I saw it and I was like, oh, that's a TV show I want to watch, that's an author I really enjoy, I'm gonna pick it up, but I'm never gonna read this. I might pick it up later in a different edition as I get more into filling out Neil Gaiman's backlist, because I do really enjoy him as an author, but this needs to go. Similarly, I am actually going to be unhauling my copy of The Handmaid's Tale by Margaret Atwood. When I read this book back in my undergrad, I read it for a literature and social change class. I really enjoyed it and I thought it was a really great story. It's got such great inherent value for what it is, but I think it's just something that I need to move on with. I've discovered that I'm not as big of a fan of Margaret Atwood as I thought I was, and Margaret Atwood herself is not that great of a person. And I'm never going to reread this, and there's much more fiction, I think, on my shelves that I could be reading that is a lot more inclusive in their feminism. It's not nearly as white feminist as Handmaid's Tale. So I think I'm just going to move on from Handmaid's Tale and fill my shelves with some other works that I think are a bit more inclusive and a bit more well-rounded. And finally, the last book in this like other category that I'm going to be unhauling is Anxious People by Frederick Bachman. This one I picked up on a whim. It was on sale at Indigo last summer, I believe. And I really don't know what this is about, except for that it's like it says it's a poignant comedy about a crime that never took place, and a would-be bank robber who disappears into thin air, and 8 extremely anxious strangers who find they have more in common than they ever imagined. The premise sounds great, but I've heard some mixed reviews, and it's just, again, it's another book that's been sitting on my shelf and I have not once gone to pick it up. Not once have I tried to read it, and not once have I felt the urge to read it. So I'm going to make room for other books that I know I actually want to read. Next up, I'm going to move on to the thrillers that I am deciding to unhaul. The first of which is going to be Gillian Flynn's Sharp Objects. So I'm a huge fan of Gillian Flynn's Dark Places. It's one of my favorite thrillers. And I've heard really good things about Sharp Objects, but again, it's just not something that I'm really wanting to pick up anytime soon. This is another one that I picked up at a book fair, and it's again mass market paperback, which I hate the experience of reading mass market paperbacks, so that always discourages me from picking one of these up. It's just an uncomfortable experience. And I still haven't read Gone Girl. I've only read Dark Places. I have all 3. But I think I am just going to move on with this copy. If I feel the urge to continue with Gillian Flynn's backlist, I will go pick it up again. Maybe if I watch the TV show and really enjoy it, I will go and pick it up again. I'm not worried about that, but this version just needs to part ways with my shelves because, again, not once have I gone to pick this up. Next up is Little Fires Everywhere by Celeste Ng. This is a very, very beloved book. It is kind of a domestic thriller following 2 main characters. I believe Elena Richardson is one of the main characters, and then Mia Warren, and it's like it's a domestic thriller. I don't know what else to say about it, really. It was a very well-received novel. It's a very well-received TV show. I've heard some high praise, but I just don't think domestic thrillers are my thing, and I really don't think I'm ever going to get to this anytime soon. So I'm going to move on from Little Fires Everywhere. This one has the Penguin Reader's Guide in the back, and it's just, I'm going to move on. I don't think I'm ever going to pick it up. Next up, I am going to be getting rid of The Luckiest Girl Alive by Jessica Knoll. This one I've had on my shelf for, again, much too long because not once have I gone to pick it up again. This one I really don't know what it's about. It seems to be following our main character Annie, who was had a big shocking public humiliation in high school and has kind of reinvented herself, but she has some secrets and these secrets might be revealed. It seems very common thriller plotline, but I don't think there's anything special about it. I haven't heard anybody read this or I haven't heard of anybody who has read this before, and so I don't really have anybody to give me the opinion that I should really pick it up. Again, I picked it up on a whim at a book fair and I just think I need to pass it along. The next two I'm going to go with by super quick again because they basically have the same reasoning as Luckiest Girl Alive, and that is If I Died Tonight by Alison Galen and Anatomy of a Scandal by Sarah Vaughan. These two again, I don't think they're for me. They're kind of, again, domestic thrillers, I believe. Maybe Anatomy of Scandal isn't, but nope, yep, yes it is. More domestic thrillers. Again, don't know anybody who's actually read either of these. I think I'm just gonna move on. Finally, the last two are books that I quite enjoyed, but I just don't feel the need to keep them on my shelf anymore because I'm never gonna reread them. The first is The Girl on the Train by Paula Hawkins, classic, very large, very popular thriller. I quite enjoyed it when I read it back in like 2014 or 2015. But my tastes have evolved. I'm not going to read it again, and I just don't think it needs to take up space on my shelf. I can make room for more books that I'm more excited about. Similarly, I am getting rid of Hidden Bodies by Carolyn Katniss. This is a sequel to You. You is one of my favorite thrillers of all time, but Hidden Bodies just did not do it for me as much as You. It was good, but it wasn't as good in my opinion. I don't plan on continuing the series, and so I think I'm just going to keep the one copy that I actually really enjoyed, which was the original, and I'm going to move on with the sequel. Next up is Normal People by Sally Rooney. I haven't actually read this yet. I don't know if I'm going to. I've heard some great things about it, and I love that it's set in Ireland and it's an Irish writer, but I don't think it's for me. I've heard mixed things about it, and I've heard that it's not like, I don't think it's the type of romance that I'm really particularly interested in. I'm much more of a rom-com person, and this one I heard is kind of very dramatic, so I don't think I'm going to get to this anytime soon, so I'm going to be moving on. Next up, I'm going to be getting rid of The Kissing Game by Mary Hart. This is a rom-com, but this is one that I this is another one that's been living on my shelf for much too long. I've had it for a couple of years now, and it's like, it seems kind of generic. Again, I haven't heard fantastic things about it, and I have so many other romances that I really want to read, so I am just going to be moving this on to somebody else who will enjoy it more. Next up, I'm going to be getting rid of The Matzo Ball by Jean Meltzer. I don't want to go into this too much, but I really did not like this book. This book just wasn't for me. I gave it a 1 star. I don't want to have it on my shelf anymore. We are moving on. Next up is Fight or Flight by Samantha Young. This one I was really excited about because it kind of has a lot of tropes that I'm really interested in, but when I was reading reviews, I saw that apparently it is there's a lot of conversations really that are very shaming of people who get abortions, and I'm not into that. And I think that would ruin the experience of reading the rest of the book for me. So I'm just going to move on. I'm not going to bother with it. So we're getting rid of this. And then finally, I'm going to be getting rid of All About Us by Tom Ellen. This is another one that is a kind of romance, but not a rom-com. It's much more dramatic and sad than I think I realized when I first picked it up. So not my vibe. Don't want to be sad. I am going to move on. Okay, finally, these 2 stacks that I've got next to me are quite large, so I'm going to try and go through these as quickly as I can, but these are my YA and middle grade books that I'm getting rid of in this unhaul. The first of which is going to be the entirety of the Queen of the Tearling series by Erica Johansson. I enjoyed this series quite a bit until I got to the ending. I think that's a very popular opinion. The ending really ruined it for me, so I'm going to, again, just pass on the series to somebody else that I think will enjoy it more. This was a really interesting take on a fantasy series. It's kind of a series that is technically set in the future, but they go into a world that is kind of like pre-civilization almost, and they have to work all their way back up to technology. And I just, yeah, it's not something I want to keep on my shelf. I'm going to move on. Next up, I'm going to be getting rid of the duology of This Savage Song and Our Dark Duet by Victoria Schwab. This is a young adult series following 2 main characters, one of which is a human and one is a monster, I believe, and there's like a musical kind of magic that is in this series. I've heard it's fantastic. I got it a long time ago. I started reading This Savage Song years ago, and I never got past the first chapter. I think for me, Victoria Schwab is doing her best when she's writing adult or when she's writing middle grade. I really enjoy her City of Ghosts series, and I loved A Darker Shade of Magic. I just don't think her YA books are for me. So I'm going to be passing along this duology. Next up, I'm going to be getting rid of my copy of Ash Princess by Laura Sebastian. This book, again, I really enjoyed when I first read it, but I think it, again, is a very typical YA fantasy, following like a oppressed princess trying to get her kingdom back from their conquerors. And I enjoyed it, but it wasn't really incredibly memorable. I think somebody else will really enjoy it a lot more, and it's just another one of those books that I'm not going to continue the series, so I think I just need to move on and make room for other series that I think I'm going to enjoy more. Next up, I'm getting rid of kind of a classic. I'm getting rid of my Goddess Test series by Amy Carter. This was a young adult series that I read back when I was reading like Hunger Games and Divergent back when I was in high school. It follows our main character, what's her name? Kate. And it's basically a retelling of Hades and Persephone, almost. It's kind of a series in which our main character finds herself in the world of the gods that are living on Earth with her. She finds out that her mother is the goddess Demeter. She is the younger sister of Persephone, and she finds out that she is being tasked with going through these 7 trials. It's interesting because each of the trials is kind of connected with one of the 7 deadly sins, but basically at the end of it, she finds out if she's worthy enough to be a goddess and to marry Hades and become the new queen of the underworld. If not, he's going to fade. And like, this was great for what it was. It was great for the time that I read it in, but I'm never going to read it again. And looking back on it, I think if I tried to read it again, I'd hate it. So I am going to pass it along. It was definitely my first Greek myth retelling that I read since Percy Jackson. So it's an interesting story, but it's definitely a product of his time, of the early 2010s, and I think I just need to move on and update my shelves a little bit. So we're gonna pass it on. Next up, I'm going to be getting rid of my copy of Stalking Jack the Ripper by Carrie Maniscalco. Again, I really enjoyed this when I read it. I read it back in about 2016. So I read it in 2016. And I really enjoyed it when it came out. It's a historical fiction story following our main character, what's her name? Audrey Rose, who is the daughter of a kind of wealthy man. She is living in Victorian London, and she ends up dressing up as a boy in order to attend her uncle's forensics classes. She wants to be a forensic scientist, but she's a woman, so God forbid she goes to school. And she ends up working at the same and interning basically with her uncle when nobody else knows, when he becomes the mortician during the Jack the Ripper case. This is a series that follows our main character going through different moments in time with different magical or infamous characters. I believe the second one is based on Dracula, third one is Houdini. So it's an interesting story, and I enjoyed it for when I read it, but again, I'm not going to continue the series, I don't think. So I think I'm going to move on and pass this along to somebody else who's going to enjoy it more. If you couldn't tell, a lot of these are going to be books that I read a long time ago that just I need to accept that I'm not going to continue the series and just enjoy it for what it was. I don't need to keep it on my shelf anymore. The last book that I'm going to get rid of that I have read is going to be One of Us is Lying by Karen N. McManus. I hated this book. That's why I'm getting rid of it. I read this a couple months ago, and I despised every second of it. I was mainly reading it just to find out the end of the story, find out who the killer was, and I was incredibly disappointed. This was pitched as kind of a Breakfast Club meets a murder mystery, when each of these characters who fits with a different one of the archetypes from the Breakfast Club, like the princess and the jock, the outcast, the burnout, that kind of thing, all end up in detention like normal, like the original story goes, but one of them doesn't make it out alive, and it follows the investigation after. I thought every single character was so two-dimensional. I hated the discussion about that they tried to do about mental health. It was horrible. I really hated that their use of queerness in this story. I really thought it was problematic, and the ending was so incredibly disappointing. So all of this is bad. I really don't like it, and I need it off my shelf. I'm sure somebody else will love this book, but it was not for me. Finally, the last few books that I'm getting rid of in this unhaul are books that I haven't read, but have just lived on my TBR for too long. So the first of which is going to be A Study in Charlotte by Brittany Cavallaro. Again, I think I've just outgrown this series. This is a kind of like a retelling of Sherlock Holmes and Watson, but it's the following the main characters, Jamie and Charlotte, who are actually the children of Watson and Sherlock. So again, I think this would be great, but I think it's just a bit too young for my tastes now, and I don't think I'm going to enjoy it if I pick it up, so I'm going to move on. Next up is a middle grade, and that is The Incredibly Inconvenient Adventures of Bronte Middlestone by Jacqueline Moriarty. This one I thought I was going to enjoy, but I picked it up a couple times and couldn't really get past the first couple pages. It's just, I think I was a lot more enamored with the synopsis when I bought it than I have been since then. It follows our main character, Bronte Middlestone, who's 10 years old, and finds out her parents have been killed by pirates, and so she has to fulfill their wishes. She has to go and spend some time and deliver unexpected assortment of gifts to her assortment of aunts. So like there's a farmer aunt, a veterinarian aunt, a pirate aunt, a rock star aunt, and she has to go and deliver all these to all her different quirky aunts. And I think I would have enjoyed this if I had picked it up right when I first heard the synopsis, but I think the synopsis has kind of grown a bit away from my taste, and so I don't think I'm going to pick it up anytime soon. On a similar note, I am getting rid of The Dreadful Tale of Prosper Redding by Alexandra Bracken. This is another middle grade. This is kind of a spooky middle grade. Again, that I thought I was going to really enjoy, but I just never felt the urge to pick it up after I bought it. And this tells the story of Prosper Redding, who ends up becoming inhabited by this demon that has been targeting his family for centuries, and he has to kind of live with and work with this demon in order to solve a mystery, I believe. I'm just not going to get to it. I know I'm not going to read it, and so I'm going to pass it along. Finally, these last few books I'm going to go over super quickly. Again, same reason. They've just lived on my shelf for too long, and I know it's gotten past the point of me wanting to pick it up. I'm a bit more selective now with my YA fantasy. I haven't read a ton of it lately, and I think I'm kind of growing out of it. I don't know, I haven't quite figured that out yet, but these books aren't sparking any interest for me anymore. So I'm going to move on and try and curate my shelves a bit better. So first up, I've got Mirage by Samia Dowd. This one has kind of mistaken identity, and like it follows two characters, one of which is a princess in a very cruel land, and one of which is a commoner who ends up having to become the body double of this princess because they look identical. She starts falling for the princess's fiance. Other things happen, fantasy things happen. Again, I don't think I'm gonna get to it anytime soon. Unfortunately, I was very excited about this one, but I think I've grown a bit past the target audience for it now. Next up is The Bone Houses by Emily Lloyd Jones. I believe this one is based on kind of Welsh mythology, and it follows zombies basically. It follows our main character Rin, who is the daughter of a family that owns a graveyard. She has to end up working with a stranger who is a map maker who has arrived in this town at the same time that these zombies that they call the Bone Houses are starting to rise with more ferocity, and she has to work together with him in order to save their world. Again, I was very excited about this when I first got it. I believe this is the Owl Crate edition, but I haven't ever felt the need to pick it up, so it's going to somebody else who will like it more. Another Owl Crate pick is Scavenge the Stars by Tara Sim. This is a retelling of The Count of Monte Cristo, I believe, which sounded super interesting when I first got to it, but another one that I just haven't reached for once since I got it, so I'm going to move on. Another Owl Crate edition, and this one I'm really sad to get rid of, but I know it's time, and that is The Guinevere Deception by Kirsten White. This is a retelling of the Arthurian legends, obviously, and it follows Guinevere, but Guinevere is like a changeling kind of character, and there's magic involved. Again, I was very hopeful for this. Again, I have the beautiful Owl Crate edition, which I'm sad to get rid of, but I need to bite the bullet and get rid of it because I'm not going to read it, so we're moving on. The last Owl Crate edition, I think this is the reason that I stopped my Owl Crate subscription, because I don't think I read a single book that I got in any of them except for House of Salt and Sorrow. And anyway, the next one is Winterwood by Shane Earnshaw. I really love The Wicked Deep by Shane Earnshaw. And I thought I was going to really enjoy this one, but I just, again, have not felt the need to pick this up since I got it. So we're going to pass it along to a new home. Finally, these last three, again, have lived on my shelves for quite a few years now, and I haven't ever picked them up. The first is Romanov by Nadine Brandes. This is a fantasy retelling of the myths and stories that came about Anastasia Romanov. And I love Anastasia. I love the story of Anastasia. I love the movie. I love the Royal Diaries Anastasia book from elementary school in Canada, but I don't think I am going to get to this anytime soon, so I'm going to move on. Next up is The Smoke Thieves by Sally Green. Again, this is one that I started reading years ago, and I didn't get past the first chapter. This one is another fantasy story with an ensemble cast that's supposed to be kind of like found family-ish. It was described as like being similar to Game of Thrones, and it was fine when I started reading it, but it wasn't good enough for me to keep going. I think I read it for a try a chapter tag back in 2019, and I haven't picked it up since, so we are going to move on and pick up something else that I think I will enjoy more. Thank you guys so much for watching. I really hope you enjoyed this video. Again, should put a disclaimer here. I'm not saying that any of these books are inherently bad. I think there's a certain audience for every book. These books are just not for me, or books that I don't think I am going to enjoy enough to keep them on my shelf. So that is why I'm getting rid of these today, and they all are going to go to good homes. So if you did enjoy this video, please give this video a thumbs up because it really does support my channel, and let me know down in the comments below what you guys think of this spring cleaning series, and or what books you think I should pick up to replace these. If you've got recommendations based off of any of these, let me know. If you're new here, please subscribe. I put out new bookish and writing videos every week, and I hope you guys have a lovely day. Bye-bye.